You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYBC.
WCYTV.
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WYBC. We have quite a bit to tackle this evening, and boy, it just so happens to start with Tim Walz being in a very serious pickle. You know him, you love him, good old tap dancing Tim Walz. He's got a couple of problems. And no, it's not just that Donald Trump called him, and I quote, retarded. No, Tim Walz, he's being blamed by his own workers and the New York Times for billions of dollars in fraud that we previously reported on by members of the Somali community. For those who are watching over on the live stream, we can put this up beautifully on the screen from the New York Times over the weekend. Quote, how fraud swamped, nice choice of words there, Minnesota's social services system on Tim Walz's watch. Prosecutors say members of the Somali diaspora. Wait a minute, prosecutors? This isn't a Republican's pounce. This is the prosecutors in the state of Minnesota. A group with growing political power. Yes, we know Ilhan Omar and Omar Fatah and all of the other people who happen to look exactly like one of those two seem to say, yes, they're very, very important. The backbone of the Minnesota community, as Ilhan says.
I am the backbone now.
To her brother late at night. President Trump has drawn national attention to the scandal amid his crackdown on immigration. I do enjoy that. Even the New York Times can't help just, they have to say, the reason this matters, not the billions of dollars in fraud, but, Trump's crackdown on immigration. Incredible stuff. Now, we will dig into a lot of these allegations, but I do want to point out the real story. The reason that Tim Walz is in trouble on this one is because he started out back in October when this scandal was uncovered by trying to downplay it as, state fraud, there's government, there's fraud, that happens. This was Tim Walz on local media back in October when this story first started the breaking into the national conversation.
Do you think the worst of the state government fraud cases have been uncovered, or do you have reason to believe there is more to come?
I think there's more. And look, we've got organized crime ring in Minnesota. I think it's been going on for years.
From Feeding Our Future to autism programs to housing stabilization, Minnesota taxpayers are victims of more than $1 billion of fraud. Do you think there was not enough skepticism for too long in state agencies that were overseeing these programs?
Now, that's a really good question. Local TV outlets, journalism groups, they do, in fact, occasionally get a really good question in. This is one of those instances. This is one of those because Tim Walz had a long-standing backing of immigrants just by nature in his weird, all the way zipped up quarter zip in this particular shot. And I got to say, Tim Walz made very clearly that if you made any questions about the Somali community or the migrant communities in Minnesota, then you were a super duper evil, awful person. In fact, you remember that when we started learning about Medicaid fraud, Tim Walz's Department of Health and Human Services refused to release the records of Medicaid providers accused of fraud to the government. It is Tim Walz's state government, under his direction, not the state legislature, under the executive office of the governor, who has refused to hand over data on SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, food stamps, to the federal government. And why? Always under the excuse, it could target immigrants. It could target migrants. After all, we can't have anything that would do any of the targeting. And then it comes out that the Somali diaspora, as the New York Times put it, they're directly involved. And it's not just the New York Times who is reporting such. You also have his own employees. An account called the Minnesota Department of Human Service Employees, which does appear to be a real account managed by, they claim to say, over 400 Minnesota state employees. And we'll explain why it appears legitimate in a second. This has been reported now, though, by several major outlets. So that meets our standard in a couple of ways here. They say, quote, Tim Walz is 100% responsible for massive fraud in Minnesota. That's going to matter here in a second because he was asked about this on Meet the Press yesterday. Quote, "We let Tim Walz know of fraud early on, hoping for a partnership in stopping fraud, but no, we got the opposite response. Tim Walz systematically retaliated against whistleblowers using monitoring, threats, repression, and did his best to discredit fraud reports. Instead of partnership, we got the full weight of retaliation by Tim Walz, certain DFL members, and an indifferent mainstream media. It's scary, it's isolating, and it left us wondering who we can turn to." They then allege that in addition to retaliating against the whistleblowers, Tim Walz disempowered the office of the legislative auditor, allowing agencies to disregard the Minnesota state legislature's findings. You know, the audits that the legislature is supposed to run, the legislature is supposed to run of their own budget. Again, he doesn't control the power of the purse. That's, according to the Minnesota state constitution, that is set with the Minnesota State House. So he diminishes the authority of the oversight committee and agents over that budget, which is very, very corrupt sounding, at least. Now, they end up talking about a couple of more, like NPR not caring about fraud because, you know, NPR sucks. Good riddance to the federal funding to, you know, NPR. This goes back to their earlier claim. I do want to clarify here. The account of the Minnesota staff fraud reporting commentary, this is the 400 or so employees that are claiming to represent this Twitter account. Back in fall of 2024, were replying to Kamala Harris and saying, hey, here is a list of, and I quote, feeding our future, the Child Care Assistance Program, Frontline Worker Bonus Pay, Evergreen Recovery Incorporated, and like 12 entries of Medicaid. And then it's an Excel spreadsheet of all of these amounts of money, the agencies, that there's not any particular, basically the different kinds of individuals that have reported this amount of fraud. It's a whole document. Did Kamala Harris reach out and, say anything? No. Did Tim Walz from his position as governor do anything? Did he appoint an independent commission? Did he once again elevate the auditor of the Minnesota state legislature? No, he did not. This is over a year ago that Tim Walz was actively ignoring this. Producer Nick, do you have something you want to add there?
I'm so surprised that Kamala Harris didn't do anything about it. I mean, it's not like she was a part of the administration that allowed a large populace that helped commit this fraud move into that state. Now,
we'll get to that in a second. The reason that we bring up Tim Walz trying so desperately to pretend that he's, the big iron on his hip, he's like the law in town, and he put these people in jail. He went on Meet the Press yesterday, and he was asked at point blank range, hey, you have been accused of being a part of over $1 billion in fraud. Working with federal funds, that's billions of dollars in fraud. What do you have to say to that? And he starts whining Donald Trump faster than your lesbian aunt who part-times at the local library.
Well, speaking of the Somali community, President Trump is targeting them and your state in part. He's citing fraud as the reason for his crackdown. Dozens of people of East African descent have been charged, convicted, and sentenced for stealing more than $1 billion in taxpayer money.
People of East African descent, otherwise known as Somalians, like all but one of them hail from Somalia, all but one. It's not like, well, this portion came from Somalia, this portion came from Kenya, this portion from Djibouti. Can't forget those Egyptians. No, I'm afraid not, Sailor Sam. But anywho, she has to get her social credit points in.
From government programs during COVID. As you know, Governor, that is more than Minnesota spends each year to run its Department of Corrections. So I want to give you a chance to respond to this. Do you take responsibility for failing to stop this fraud in your state?
Well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail.
Oh, there it is. He takes responsibility for putting people in jail. Amazing. I am truly fascinated. In fact, way to go, Tim Walz. Very good. Yes, he put people in jail. Of course, he ignored the fraud for at least a year, likely 2 years, based on some of the tweets and the original filings of the emails that we have. And he allowed the fraud to persist and continue. He didn't freeze any assets. No, he was out there talking about how great it was that he was friends with immigrants and migrants and school shooters and everything else under the sun.
In this case, putting people in jail really didn't solve the crime.
those inches are rather resting, I might say. Radio crew, we have to send you over to commercial. We're going to continue on the live stream because Tim Walz just gets worse. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Now, live stream crew, while the radio folks are over on their FCC commercial break, Tim Walz then deflects from his big iron on his hip sheriff, this town ain't big enough for two of us, I'm real tough. Tim Walz, the brownie paper towel man argument, to whining about Donald Trump.
Governors don't get to just talk theoretically. We have to solve problems. And
that would be the first I've ever heard of a state governor not talking theoretically. If there is one position in this country that talks theoretically, it is state governors, especially state governors running for office or re-election. It's amazing. They can eliminate taxes and wipe your behind. It's incredible what they can do theoretically.
Note, it's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated.
Yes, the perfect answer to fraud. Minnesotans who were defrauded, they're so generous with their fraud. Yes, when we're screwing over the taxpayer, we're laughing at how generous they are about donating to charities that we're also stealing from and then ignoring because can't insult people like, oh man, they're not all Somalis. I do like the not all Somalis line. He was one of the people who said the not all white people line against accusations of racism was bad, or not all police officers. But anyway.
But that attracts criminals. There's a reason Minnesota ranks as the top, lowest childhood poverty, best place for children to live. People are taking advantage of that. They're going to prison. That is.
I mean, it's not the best place for raising your children. If you happen to live in one of his particular cities that has large trans communities that are extremely violent. Not a joke. Egregiously gross. The policies of Tim Walz.
Totally disconnected with demonizing an entire group of people who came here fleeing civil war and created a vibrant community that makes Minnesota and this country better. But that's Donald Trump. Deflect, demonize, come up with no solutions. He's not going to help fix anything on fraud. My God, there's a big difference between fraud and corruption is something he knows about.
Okay, little political tip here for you guys. If you are in the middle of a rough interview, those of you aspiring politicos, and you're asked a question and you want to deflect, do not deflect by saying, but you know what? I'm not deflecting. I'll tell you who deflects. Donald Trump deflects. No, Donald Trump's deflecting, and fraud and corruption, they're just as American as apple pie and tampons in the boys' bathroom. Incredible. I'm thrilled. I love how he can't illustrate any examples of how the Somalian migrants have made the United States any better. Again, you say Little Italy's about a town, and, you can picture some really wonderful things.
They're the backbone.
Yeah, but the backbone, you say anything about like Little Somalia in a town, and usually it's like when you drive your car in, does it drive out with all the tires? Or do you rely on the cinder blocks to roll the rest of the way down the street? Beautiful stuff.
It is interesting how large the backbone grows as each group that is under duress, under the microscope for how badly they contribute, they then become the backbone. Illegal immigrants, they're the backbone.
Well, it gets worse because Tim Walz, who has been on the record saying he doesn't care about the president's health records, then pivots to talking about Donald Trump's MRI. Okay.
Well, here we got a guy on Thanksgiving where we spent time with our families. We ate, we played Yahtzee, we cheered for football or whatever. This guy.
We cheered for football or whatever, said the former assistant coach who was talking about throwing a pick six as a play. We watched some sports ball, maybe.
Is apparently in a room ranting about everything else. This is not normal behavior. It is not healthy. And presidents throughout time have released a couple things. They've released their tax returns, not Donald Trump, and they've released...
No, his were leaked by someone illegally.
Their medical records, not Donald Trump. And look...
By the way, have released their medical record. I just want to make this explicitly clear. The vast majority of U.S. presidents have not released medical records. They haven't. Woodrow Wilson was just dead in office for the last couple of months of his term. Released medical records. Okay.
The MRI is one thing, but I think what's most concerning about this is, as your viewers out there are listening, has anyone in the history of the world ever have an MRI assigned to them?
Yeah, I mean, A lot of people have, in fact, gotten MRIs. When you go to the emergency room and you say, my head hurts, they immediately order a CAT scan, an MRI, something. Scans are ordered by doctors' offices as preemptive checks all the time. We got to bring the radio crew back from commercial. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Fraud free.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. It's really funny watching Tim Walz try to make the case that, well, you can't just say mean things about Somalians. That's really terrible, awful, evil stuff. After all, the fraud, that's like nothing. Fraud, I mean, that's just the donations of a thankful and charitable group of people. When Tim Kaine of Virginia was asked about this, he pivoted so hard, he smacked into a wall. Check this out.
But don't say that all Afghans in the United States, those who served with our military and who lost their lives and their health and their families in many ways by doing so, don't say that they're all bad. Don't say that people who come from third world countries are bad. Virginia, about 1 out of 9 of us is an immigrant, and our immigrant communities in Virginia have been an enormous source of strength.
You see the equating there? 1 out of 9 people in Virginia is an immigrant. That's not what was asked. It's not ending immigration from all countries in the world. It's ending immigration temporarily from third world countries, Somalia, Afghanistan, which we're going to get to in a second.
To our Commonwealth and to our country, and it's wrong to target them all for the bad actions of an individual, just like we wouldn't target other communities in the United States for the bad actions of one individual.
Yeah. Again, reminder that every single time there is some type of a tragedy, Tim Kaine is the very first guy to run out and blame an entire community. So no. Number two, again, the reason that the United States as a people are reacting so negatively to the migrants from Afghanistan that Biden brought over in 2021, one of whom ended up shooting 2 National Guardsmen, one of whom has passed away. One is now awake and conscious. Of course, you also have the over 70 Somalians actively committing fraud against the Minnesotan people. And the president over the weekend said, hey, that's enough. These people aren't vetted. They were just given magical migrant status. We'll talk about this a little bit later. The New York Times admitted something blisteringly insane about why Biden allowed all of this temporary protected status, which I was told was to just shelter people from the storm. Oh, just such benevolence and kindness. No. But Amy Klobuchar was also asked about the Somalian migrant crime in Minnesota and also the violence, because Minnesota does have a lot of gang-related violence. And her response as a senator from Minnesota is precious.
Does Minnesota have a problem with gangs roaming the streets?
Every state has a problem with crime.
Every state has. Every state has. Crime is just inherent to the culture of our country, producer Nick. I mean, yeah, sure. Indiana doesn't have huge communities of Somalians that are stealing millions and millions and millions of dollars. I mean, we had that group of Afghan migrants that came in and completely trashed Indiana facilities. But, well, I mean, come on, who hasn't trashed a facility or committed, gang violence in their life? I shot 3 pimps on my street this morning for encroaching on our territory. Didn't you?
It's unfair of you as citizens to expect us not to have roving gangs of violent illegal immigrants.
Yeah, this is Mexico, for the heck. I mean, we got to enforce the cartelos, man. We got to keep the crime universal, man.
But what the president has done here is taken a horrific crime that occurred in Washington, D.C., where one beloved Guard member is still struggling for his life.
For those who are watching the live stream right now, or those who are listening, the Chiron on the State of the Union for Klobuchar's interview says, quote, Trump claims Somalian gangs are roving Minnesota streets, end quote. That's true, by the way. Klobuchar is now complaining about the Afghan shooting 2 National Guardsmen, and not what was asked.
Another was shot and killed, and the perpetrator, the murderer, is behind bars and being prosecuted. He took that case And then he went 2,400 miles away to Somalia and somehow indicted an entire group of people, 80,000 of them in my state, as well as later all naturalized citizens, 24 million people in the United States of America. This is what he does. And he
yes. Okay. So she pretends that the Somalian fraud case just doesn't exist at all. A huge thanks to Peyton Walter for the $100 super chat. Very generous of you. He says, Matt Damon, and then says, sorry, I don't have anything intelligent to say, but here's some money. You're doing good work. That's very, very kind of you. Thank you. First of all, Somalia is not 2,400 miles from Afghanistan. It's not 2,400 miles away from here either. So I'm not sure what numbers she's making up, but it's good to know we have the expert Klobuchar navigator in there. All of this comes down to essentially one thing, though. There is this narrative the leftist keeps trying to draw that Donald Trump hates brown people. Again, what a brown person is, they have no idea. Because brown can mean anything. It can mean Native American, brown can mean someone from India, brown can mean someone from Afghanistan, brown can mean an Italian in the right context. If you remember back during the 2020 election, brown can mean anything at all at any time. Brown is the panacea to just call someone awful, because they can't just say Donald Trump's racist, because that's really lost its zing, its flavor. So they just say Donald Trump hates brown people. Here was, of course, Mark Kelly of Arizona saying exactly that.
When I heard the secretary say that they're going to pause immigration from third world countries, I mean, I take that as a message that they don't want brown people coming to the United States. And
or a large number of crimes, such as large-scale fraud, such as commercial driver's license hit and run situations, such as gang rapes and taking over apartments and arson and grand theft auto, numerous carjackings, not to mention defrauding the immigration system, the agriculture system, the energy sector, the Department of Labor, like every single law that we have on ID verification, not to mention the shootings that are occurring. Those all seem to come from predominantly third world migrant situations.
Based on Mark Kelly's statement, I'm assuming that he believes that for a country to be third world, the prerequisite is that the population needs to be brown?
There is a lot of that. There's a lot of that. So we'll talk about this with redistricting later, but a lot of people seem to equate every action. So Trump's like, we got to stop importing terrorists. And people are like, wow, could you hear what Donald Trump just said about brown people? It's like, whoa, wait, hold on a second here. Did you just try to make the claim that all terrorists are brown? Oh no. Oh my. This is when they say, well, you can't get rid of illegal immigrants. Who's going to do our slave labor? If we don't have brown people, who's going to clean my office and mow my lawn? It's like, oh, saying the quiet part out loud there, are you? Yikes. And of course, this all comes down to Mark Kelly, because Mark Kelly's having a rough time. Mark Kelly, one of the seditious six, who headed up releasing the video, retired naval captain, who got out there and said, don't obey illegal orders. And he doubled and tripled down on it. And then people said, well, what illegal orders are you talking about? Because the Uniform Code of Military Justice, as well as the Constitution in relation to Congress, makes it very clear you should really be careful when you are discussing certain things to the military. It's not a free speech issue. You can't just go up and say, hey, just letting you know, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. And then lean in awkwardly and saying it over and over. That's undermining authority. It makes people second guess where they are and what they're doing. And we had made the prediction this was all about the Venezuela situation in the Caribbean, the striking of narco-terrorist boats. But I just want to bring it back up again. What does Kelly consider illegal orders? Here he was yesterday on Meet the Press saying, well, I don't really know what were illegal orders. What is an illegal order per se?
Fine. You can certainly go to the judge, advocate generals, the lawyers, and have a discussion about it. If you don't have time, you just say simply, I'm not going to do that. That's against the law.
It puts a lot of burden on the troops to make a decision in real time.
It puts a tremendous amount of burden on officers in the military, but that is their responsibility.
Oh, hang on. Notice the frame shift there. So first of all, he says, well, who's not supposed to obey these illegal orders? He says, well, yeah, normally you're supposed to go to the JAG officer. You're not really supposed to, just say no, but also you should just say no. Because the flip side of that is, well, because if you don't, you will be prosecuted criminally, which is what a lot of Democrats are suggesting. And so the interviewer says, well, hang on, that's a lot of burden on the military. And then what does he do? This is the most classic brass nonsense. He goes, well, yes, it puts a lot of burden on officers. No, you inept moron. It puts a lot of burden on everyone in the situation. It puts a lot of burden on the flag officers. It puts a lot of burden on the field officers. Not to mention the enlisted you are asking to carry out the task. But Kelly has never once cared about any enlisted man in this country, ever. It's such a self-obsessed game for him when it comes to being an officer. It's pathetic. He's been called out numerous times by other officers for it. The man has the paternal officer's instinct of a Somalian fraud officer in Minnesota.
Responsibility, and they can figure out, a reasonable person can tell something that is legal and something that is illegal.
So,
again, who's out there saying, now hold on a second here, have you considered whether or not it's appropriate to strike a boat in this situation? He can't. Sorry, radio crew, we're a little over time. We'll send you to commercial. Don't go anywhere. We'll continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett cast. We'll let him continue here because his argument gets funnier as it goes on.
Would you refuse these specific orders to strike drug boats if you were still in uniform?
Now that's a serious question. Would you refuse to carry out specific orders? Would you have carried out the strikes ordered on the Venezuelan origin, or in the Eastern Pacific, likely Colombian origin, narco-terrorist boats based on U.S. intelligence? Not just people in senior political staff at the Pentagon. Due to the intelligence recommendations in the Admiralty, would you have made those recommendations? Let's hear his answer, because this is the real question. She doesn't just ask, well, do you think any orders are illegal? That's what people have asked before. And he said, well, I don't know of any illegal orders. I don't know. Here's how he answered this.
You mentioned that you were a captain in the Navy.
Sorry, let me get the right clip back.
Fine. Well, the difference between the initial strike and what is being reported, as a second strike, and those things are different. I think this administration has tied themselves in knots, the explanations that we have received on how this is all legal. And I was saying weeks ago, my concern is with the service members.
Oh, interesting. Now, this means it all boils down to this Washington Post allegation of strikes in the Caribbean. Now, you'll notice he didn't answer there. Like, well, would you have carried out? He says, well, it's a question of strikes and second strikes. This all boils down to a particular story in Venezuela. Now, let's dive into that a little bit, because what comes out of this, first of all, it tells you exactly why the Democrats have been focusing on their do not obey illegal orders maneuver, that kind of a thing. The Washington Post released an article right before the weekend that said, exclusive. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth gave an order to, quote, kill everybody, end quote, in the first strike on suspected drug boats in the Caribbean. After 2 men survived, the mission commander ordered a second strike to comply with Hegseth's instructions, according to 2 sources. Now, they didn't name these sources. They didn't actually provide anything of substance. What they said was, Hegseth said, yeah, here are confirmed narco terrorists. If you find confirmed narco terrorists, if confidence is high, kill them. And so they threw a kinetic strike, threw some sort of missile at the boat. And according to the Washington Post report, that there were 2 men desperately clinging like Jack and Rose at the end of the Titanic. And they were clinging there, and they were just clinging. Oh, they were so sad and lost and lonely. Probably a grandmother and a pregnant mom clinging to each other after a nice day out fishing. And wouldn't you know it, Pete Hegseth, he called and he said, is that a mom and a bassinet? Kill them all. And then they did it. Just like the Nazis did with Pearl Harbor. So says the Washington Post. It's an Animal House reference for those of you out there. So that's, first of all, bullcrap. And number 2, it has now evolved from pseudo-journalistic bullcrap to becoming this entire narrative argument of war crimes galore that is going to be the end. Oh, and everyone needs to be prosecuted. Ro Khanna got out there and said, we're going to open up an investigation. We're going to talk about that here in a minute or two because Mark Kelly went back and forth as to whether or not he finds this action illegal. There's a reason why for that. It's getting real interesting for the man that is likely to face the rest of an investigation, if not a court-martial. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back in a second. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast. Mark Kelly, in his own special way, after releasing that video in which he was just, vaguely saying, don't obey illegal orders. Well, now the rest of the media has identified quite clearly what it is that he was talking about, which is the situation regarding strikes against narco-terrorist running boats in the Southern Caribbean. And Mark Kelly, in the midst of this, I guess some are saying it's a big, huge scandal because, Hegseth, now they've decided Hegseth may have committed war crimes. That's the new word you're going to hear over and over this week's war crimes. Well, when Kelly went on CNN's Sunday show, State of the Union, he then says something rather interesting when he's asked, so would you have carried out the orders to strike narco-terrorist boats? This is where the smoking gun, no pun intended, comes into play.
You mentioned that you are a captain in the Navy. If you received that order, would you have carried it out?
No. No, and I'm a guy who I have sunk 2 ships. I've sunk an OSA-2 missile patrol boat in Kuwait Harbor, a Palnakni troop carrier in the Persian Gulf during the first Gulf War. I never, in that situation, questioned whether those strikes were legal.
Why?
We were given an order to do this. It was a time of war. These were Iraqi ships with a...
Well, if we're saying a time of war, well, then according to the State Department, the United States has declared under authority given to the Executive Office of the President and Associative Departments that a state of war can, in fact, be levied against foreign terror groups. This is one of the outcomings of 9/11. You don't like this? Don't take it up with me. Take it up with Barack Obama, who made sure that precedent was well-founded. The whiny libertarian war crime, they were innocent, just children and lovers out on the water. No, they were not. First of all, don't be stupid. Don't be Tim Walz. And next, you really shouldn't get out there and make the assumption that, I knew that they were legal and just orders. Clearly, I know better than the intelligence apparatuses. Again, we have every single camera in this hemisphere pointed at the coasts of Venezuela. Again, these high-speed lance boats are not fishing trawlers, you morons. High-speed... Quit it with that nonsense. No one believes it. By the way, the average American people, according to the polling data, they do not believe these are innocent people being struck whatsoever.
Iraqi crew members who pose a threat to the United States military, in this case, who they invaded Kuwait. We're trying to kick them out of Kuwait. This was approved by Congress. All of that, right?
Again, the post-9/11 measures giving the president the ability to prosecute imminent terror threats against the United States has been passed by Congress. But Kelly, doing his little hunched-over Winston Churchill routine, trying to be Mr. Soldier Statesman, seems to have forgotten the rules that are on the books. But it gets better because he has now admitted he would not have followed those orders. Why? Because he thinks those orders were illegal. Now, according to the actual military law here, that's not an illegal order. A second strike would not have been an illegal order here whatsoever. And here's why. If the order was given to destroy the boat completely, which from every piece of evidence that we have, every record that has been released, the boats were to be destroyed. And if the strike hit the boats and a boat was not destroyed completely, a second strike would follow up. You say, Tony, what's your evidence for this? Every single eliminate the grid square strike by artillery, by air, by drone from remote that has occurred in the last 50 years. It was a huge matter of importance. During the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Gulf War, Iraq and Afghanistan, half of Operation Enduring Freedom was about the importance of eliminating the threat entirely, not just with specially declared groups where there's no ambassador of a narco cartel sitting in Washington, D.C. His office is in the Minnesota state capitol. Sorry. Anyway, the idea that they think they're really going to get him here, absolutely not. So today he held another little press conference, that being Senator Mark Kelly. And he's now back to saying, well, I don't know of any illegal orders, because what he said now is, I would, in fact, disobey lawful orders because I think they're illegal. You cannot do that. You cannot encourage people to violate orders that you find unlawful. We have JAGs for that. I happen to notice you weren't a JAG. As he accurately said, you're a naval captain. Did you notice how quickly he said, yeah, any strike orders that were passed down to me, I took care of immediately. Why? You were responsible as the old man, as the CO, as the captain, as the skipper, for your ship. All of the enlisted men and the petty officers, the NCOs, and the officers on your ship are under your care. And if you don't act immediately and with due haste, you are putting those on your ship at risk. Any leader of a platoon, any CO, any XO for that matter, who does not immediately obey an order, puts the entire safety and security of his platoon, of his company, of his battalion, regiment, whatsoever, he puts those at risk. It is an incredibly dangerous thing to do. But alas, here's him today doubling back yet again because he realizes he's in hot water, saying, well, I'm not aware of any illegal orders.
Sort of flimsy legality that was being offered during the briefings. Were these sort of strikes that are now in the news what you were making reference to when you posted that video telling members of the military that they needed to feel okay just obeying orders that they felt were illegal?
Based on who this president is and who the Secretary of Defense is, and specifically things that the president has said in the past and things he was...
Listen to how nervous. You can hear his breath catching in his throat as he...
talking about doing in the future. Let me give you an example. 2016, he's talking about something on a debate stage that was clearly illegal. And he was reminded by Brett Baer from Fox News that that would be an illegal order. Military won't do that. You know what the president's response was to that? The military will not refuse my orders.
Completely out of context. He's citing a debate from 2016. He has no examples of actual current illegal orders. They're all hypotheticals. Well, I mean, if you think about it. But he had an answer on CNN State of the Union. I would not have followed that order. He has very clearly delineated what he finds to be legal and illegal. He now knows he's in very hot water because he just gave whatever prosecutor for the court martial that might come up all of the evidence that is needed. This Washington Post article that they thought they were going to run out with, like the signal scandal for Hegseth at the beginning of the Trump administration, is already blowing up in their faces. Again, if you have an MQ-9 in the region, you got a Reaper drone in the air, be very careful what grid square you ask the operator to let loose on. Because if you're in that grid square, the advisement it's danger close only goes so far. You let off an explosive right next to you, you better be aware shrapnel doesn't care who you are. All these Democrats got we'll get him for war crimes, we'll get him. And then getting a bunch of foreign military to get out there and violate the Uniform Code of Military Justice. All over yet again, whether it's Kilmar Abrego Garcia, Mr. Maryland Man, MS-13 tattooed knuckle wife beater boy, whether it's the series of shooters, violent members of migrant communities around the country, consistently the Democrats all choose to die on the worst hills possible and defending narco-terrorists. Again, with all the intelligence leaks, if there was not extremely high confidence from the intel communities that these were narco-terrorist boats, the leaks would already be out there, boys and girls. Radio crew, we got to send you to commercial one more time. We're going to continue on the live stream because Mark Kelly thinks Trump's trying to kill him. His words, not mine. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. I'm serious, by the way. The real point of all of this, Mark Kelly, is just doing what Alex Padilla was doing. A reminder, Alex Padilla, he did this little half-hearted run-up with no ID on, no pin, no nothing, to try to get up in Kristi Noem's face during a press conference. Her security tackled him to the ground because they see, wow, large guy sprinting at the director of Homeland Security. And they tackled him. And then he was like, I was almost murdered. Now Mark Kelly is trying the same sad routine.
President Trump is trying to silence me, threatening to kill me.
I mean, he's just threatening. He said that anyone who commits treason or sedition should be hanged. You know, what the law says should happen to those who are seditious. And again, there was a time in society when we were very careful with our words, because when you just said flamboyant, stupid things, you had to own up to your words. There was this warped idea of the First Amendment where everyone thinks they can go into any place and say whatever they want, and there are no legal ramifications for it. That's not how it works. Your weird fetishistic Disney idea of what you think the First Amendment means doesn't make it so. It's like these whiny people who show up to town hall meetings and say, I demand for you to listen to me. It's like, we're discussing something totally different. I don't care. First Amendment. No, that's not how this works.
Suddenly, Mark is real uncomfortable with people just saying things. Just saying the law. We're just stating the law. You know, you don't have to follow legal orders. If you commit treason and you're a seditionist, you should be hanged.
Again, the statutes on sedition are very, very clearly articulated. Do you know why? Because in the time of the Articles of Confederation, that was a serious problem the early United States dealt with. And so when those articles were written, we have all of the minutes of the debate. We have Alexander Hamilton talking for 9 freaking hours. He mentions part of this. The Federalist Papers, they mention why these things had to be clear, why they had to be different than the British Army and the British Navy, why they had to, for heaven's sake, be different than Louis's military in the last few years of its life. It mattered. And now we're just throwing that aside. So I do want to move on because now the media is very quickly changing their story as well. So now CNN and Washington Post reporters are clarifying, well, actually, it's not that Hegseth issued the orders for the war crimes. Actually, it was Admiral Bradley, the SOCOM commander, for the Southern Operations Commander. He's who issued the order, so actually he did it. By the way, here's a little citation here. Underneath the Washington Post article, top comment, Mark Kelly warned this exact thing would happen. Illegal orders from people who think Call of Duty is military experience. Here you go. This is always where the narrative was going. It's stupid, it's incoherent, and it's illiterate. But that's never stopped them before,
and
boys and girls.
people who think that military law is based off a few good men.
And now we get to talk about Franklin and Hegseth. This is my favorite. We got to bring the radio crew back from commercial one more time. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
The Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Now, there are those of you out there, maybe you're listening to the show and you think, Tony's an idiot. This is a serious topic. These are serious. This matters. Oh, wow. This is a bunch of children. Mark Kelly is not a serious person. And I'm going to explain why. It all has to do with Franklin. Now, I'm raising young children, and we happen to have a couple of Franklin books. Franklin, I can't believe I'm explaining this on the air, or that I'm so excited to be entering this segment with this. Franklin is a turtle, a cartoon turtle, who is just going about his business, and he's learning activities and whatever, and my kids love the Franklin books, whatever. Hegseth released an AI mock-up for your Christmas wish list, and it's Franklin, the turtle, in like a Bell Huey, and he's like leaning out of the door with an RPG. It says Franklin targets narco terrorists, and there's like drug cartel boats beneath it off the coast of some jungle, and it's blowing up. Franklin targets narco terrorists. Now, there were numerous sets of pearls that were immediately clutched by every menopausal liberal from Tim Walz to Jessica Welch. I don't know, you know what I mean? The old angry blonde ladies that show up and yell at things. Those liberals lost their ever-loving minds at this, which, by the way, just goes to show you we finally found a book that public school boards would ban for elementary classrooms. Genderqueer, graphic depictions of pedophilia, no problem. Put it on the shelves. Kids need to read it. Franklin targets narco-terrorists. That's too pro-America. How dare you say that narco-terrorists, the people who are trafficking drugs, women and children in this country, into this country, oh, those people have to be protected. The pearl clutching was immediate. And by the way, the pearl clutching was not just from the Karens online. Mark Kelly also lost his mind about this exact thing today. Here you go.
He's putting out on the internet turtles with rocket-propelled grenades. Have you seen this?
Have you seen
this? This is the Secretary of Defense. This is not a serious person. He should have been fired after Signalgate.
There it is. There's Signalgate coming into play. So first of all, LOL. I mean, come on. There you go. He's posting pictures of turtles with RPGs. Think of the children. First of all, he's the Secretary of War. Number two, you guys do realize that the best dark humor comes from the military. I don't know what, stick up your rear end officer school that this goober came from, but I'll make this very, very clear. The way that men cope with stressful situations is in fact dark humor. That's okay. Oh no, Trump said the R word. That's so mean and terrible. Stop the pearl clutching. Stop it. Everyone gets real soft all of a sudden. Hegseth posted a picture of Franklin the turtle. He's posting, one more time, he's posting turtles.
He's putting out on the internet.
On the internet? He's just posting it out there on the internet. Foodnetwork.com. blackpeoplemeet.com. He's posting pictures of turtles. Stop him, someone.
Turtles with rocket-propelled grenades.
We're going to have to cut that. Just turtles with rocket-propelled grenades. We're just going to have to put that as a sound clip in the show. Just incredible. I mean, kids, do you want to read Franklin Targets Narco-Terrorists? I demand we write this right now. We're going to sketch it out. I'll reach out to the author. It's going to be incredible. By the way, now, Secretary of War Hegseth has posted another a statement in response to now all of the whining about Admiral Mitch Bradley. Let's make one thing clear. Admiral Mitch Bradley is an American hero, a true professional, and has my 100% support. I stand by him in the combat decisions he's made on the September 2nd mission and all others since. America is fortunate to have such men protecting us. When this Department of War says we have the back of our warriors, we mean it. Yeah, correct. Ro Khanna, though, he's out there to make some announcements. He's here to make it clear. Unprecedented investigations. Unprecedented. It's in the future. What's the unprecedented? A bipartisan investigation into a Trump official. We've never seen a Trump official investigated before. No way.
Now, Congressman, you mentioned earlier in the interview that many Republicans are outraged about these strikes, outraged about this follow-on strike. What can you tell us behind the scenes that's happening right now? This bipartisan push, it seems like it's growing with every single day, but with this White House admission, I could only imagine the outrage that they're going to face now.
Well, we are about to announce an unprecedented bipartisan House Armed Services investigation.
Unprecedented. No one's ever done it. No one's ever investigated a Trump official, except for like the dozens of times over the last couple of years this has happened. Every freaking day. Always.
Into this illegal strike.
There you go. They've already determined it's illegal. It's an illegal strike. They don't have any of the information about it before the investigation is over. They've decided it. Judge, jury, executioner, they've got it. They're sending their own little second strike package right now. Now, as for the unprecedented thing, allow me to tell you in advance who is absolutely going to be part of this big bipartisan push. It's going to be a bunch of angry Democrats and like some rhinos. And by rhinos in this point now, I mean people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's not even going to be long for Congress anyway, since she's announced she's resigning at the beginning of the year, because she is convinced that what the United States is, we're regime changing in Venezuela. It's Iraq Part 2, Electric El Boogaloo. Excellent. Also, probably like Thomas Massey, because he's also tweeted angrily about Venezuela. Basically, anyone who's very mad that the United States is operating in our hemisphere with the military in the Republican side is going to be a part of this investigation. Now, I will let you in on a little bit of a secret. It's going to go nowhere. Because, again, according to the legal theories, given that Hegseth gave the order as the Secretary of War under his constitutional authority given to him under the Patriot Act, the Expanded Powers Act after 9/11, the expanded powers of targeting designated terrorist organizations who are a threat to the United States, which again, when Marco Rubio sat down, hunched his shoulders forward and said, we're going to declare them all terrorist organizations. They may not be around tomorrow. And then like the screen slowly faded out. Yeah, that had consequences. And they're very, very mad about that. This investigation is going absolutely nowhere. Radio crew, it is unfortunately that time. You should watch the rest of the show over on the live stream. I'm not done yet. We've got all kinds of stuff. Not to mention some judicial shenanigans with Alina Habba, Jasmine Crockett's back on her nonsense. And don't forget that thing from the New York Times I teased a little bit earlier about Biden's master migrant strategy. Incredible. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Radio crew, we'll see you tomorrow here on The Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. All right. Now that we've sent the radio crew off to that great beyond, there are a few more interesting facets from the news today. First of all, a 3-judge appeal panel has decided that the Trump attorney Alina Habba is no longer allowed to serve in her capacity. I believe Fox News broke this story today. Check it out.
Appeals court is now siding with a lower court ruling to disqualify President Trump's pick for New Jersey U.S. Attorney Alina Habba. So there is a 3-judge panel, and it ruled that the Trump administration used an illegal method to nominate Habba as the top prosecutor in the state. The judges wrote in their opinion that Trump administration's argument would effectively permit anyone to fill the U.S. attorney role indefinitely. And this case could see further appeal before a full panel of Third Circuit judges, or it could head to the Supreme Court, and we'll keep you posted on what happens.
Now, here's what the judges allege. Quote, she was neither confirmed by the Senate nor appointed by district trial court judges, which are considered the 2 traditional pathways for that particular appointment. There is going to need to be a moment in time when the Senate hammers through the rest of Trump's appointments to various positions. That's just a fact. Now, does that mean that the judicial panels and the appeal courts and rulings are not a problem? No, they are, absolutely. And this is one of the reasons why the Senate absolutely needs to impeach and remove Judge James Boasberg, which is what they're in the middle of doing. Again, if judges are just allowed to run amok and act outside of their constitutional authority, then that's going to be a problem. But in the meantime, something the Trump administration did meticulously in the first year of his term in office has been to follow the rules as much as possible, almost malicious compliance in a way, to make sure that judicial orders are being followed while still accomplishing things. And again, given that Alina Habba is the one who indicted LaMonica McIver, Lindsay Halligan was the one who indicted James Comey and Letitia James. Yeah, judges are going to step in and try to prevent others from being held accountable. That is what the left's judges do. Chuck Schumer has admitted as such time after time. But this is something the Trump administration needs to take seriously enough that they ensure all of the Senate is continually focused on pushing these people through. Every time the Senate has its doors open, it should be confirmation time. We're not done yet. And if we just go with 120-day appointments here, 280-day appointments here, you're going to see these things smack down, because there is going to be weaseling unless it's rammed through. Now, weaseling comes in many forms. I prefer to enjoy the kind of weaseling best known by the great representative of Dallas, Her Royal Ebonicness, Jasmine Crockett. That's right. Jasmine Crockett's out here. She has opinions about migration as well. She has opinions. In our beginning of the good, the bad, and the awkward, I'm not quite sure if this is bad or awkward. She wants to tell you where the deportations are focused on. Here you go. Jasmine Crockett, God bless her.
Because if that's the case, let's talk about the white supremacists and how many of them need to be kicked out of this country, because I can guarantee you I can track down more crimes that they've committed, because overall immigrants have a lower crime committal rate.
Crime committal rate. Than
white supremacists. But we don't want to talk about that in this.
Okay. 2 things. Number 1, so she wants to say white people. You can clearly say that's what she says. Well, white supremacists. So first of all, how are you going to track those people down? Are you saying those who have committed like really violent crimes? Because I'm of the opinion that if you've committed a violent crime, for example, the nature of a school shooting or something, you should be hanged in the public square. If you commit a violent sexual act, you should be hanged in the public square. I don't care if you're, red or yellow, black and white. You've committed a violent crime of the sexual nature or a mass violent crime like ramming your vehicle into a crowd of people or setting a bunch of women and children on fire or an encouragement of sexual assault or a school shooting, that kind of a child-affiliated situation, mass violence or mass sexual violence against children. Yeah, that absolutely should be a hanged in the public square thing. Number two, the reason that it is such a big deal to Americans when those who have come into the country commit expressly violent crimes has two parts. Number one, these are supposed to be vetted people. There's an idea that you should, to come to the United States, be able to articulate why you would make the country a better place. You don't have a right to be here. You don't have a right to leech off of the resources of the United States. And yet you have a lot of people coming into the country from various places in the world that seem to believe they are entitled to the resources of the United States, so then they can misuse them. That's a problem. Number two, national security issue for Americans. Illegal immigrants or large-scale migration into the United States is a sore point for Americans because they shouldn't have been here to begin with. They shouldn't have been here. If you're a homegrown citizen of the United States and you commit a violent crime, we have law enforcement that is built to arrest you. But if you have it's like if I knew in advance that I was sending my kid to a party in which all of the kids had hand, foot, and mouth, and I knowingly sent my kid to that party anyway, well, yeah, then I'm kind of asking for them to get hand, foot, and mouth. If I send them to a party and didn't know that there was any kind of a concern or a problem, and then we find out later, nobody knew, but somebody had something, that's different. We are very well aware of the political situations in Haiti, in Somalia, in Afghanistan, the entire freaking Middle East, South Asia, Africa as a whole. We don't owe people trying to escape political instability a spot here in the United States. And if we do, it should be a far better vetting scenario than, oh yeah, I'm escaping persecution. I'm a great person. Let me in. There ought to be a little bit more than that. And when there isn't, people end up facing dire, deadly consequences. That's why Americans are upset about it. And it's bewildering to Americans that people like Jasmine Crockett won't even admit that. They won't even admit, yeah, maybe we should hang on with the Somalian immigration until we figure out what's going on. Maybe we should hang on, because then you start to ask, well, why? Well, because some cultures are objectively better than others. Somalian culture sucks. Afghani culture sucks. It does. Oh, that makes you really bad and terrible and awful. Why? You tell me what's so beautiful about Somali or Afghani culture that's so desperately important to bring it into the United States, because that has consequences. There are people coming into this country who are not all live and let live and just have a good time and shucksy doodles. And when you let people into the country unvetted, they end up taking advantage of the system. Now, this brings us to one of the most insane admissions from the New York Times. Quote, Mr. Biden allowed many migrants to enter the country temporarily as a way to incentivize them to avoid crossing the border illegally. Those people became eligible to work in the United States, receive Social Security numbers, and in some cases, receive federal benefits. End quote. That was printed in an immigration story for the New York Times, in an article titled Fearful But Determined, Altered Lives for Non-Citizens. There you go, boys and girls. They are admitting what the majority of Americans knew the entire time. Biden knew that if he didn't import them, they were going to illegally immigrate anyway. He brought them in, gave them temporary protected status. Why? Because otherwise they'll just illegally immigrate anyway. So we might as well, she'd just get an abortion anyway, so you might as well facilitate the abortion. They're going to do drugs anyway. You just might as well make all drugs legal. What's the purpose of laws? People are going to break them anyway. And then Biden brought them in. We were told it was escaping persecution. It was a huge humanitarian crisis. And then those people got Social Security numbers. I was told they weren't mooching off of the system. I was told these migrants weren't costing me any taxpayer dollars. I was told they weren't receiving Medicare or Medicaid or other federal services. And the New York Times just casually, we all know this is why Biden was doing it. Yeah, we all do know. Absolutely. We're very, very well aware. I was called a desperately evil person for pointing this out when Afghani migrants were brought in 2021 and 2022 into Indiana. And they started trashing places. And it was disgusting. And I said, hey, this is kind of an issue. And they're like, how could you say? And they're not receiving any money at all. This is all donations from Oprah's pants pockets. It's wonderful. And no, it wasn't. You were paying for it the entire time. And if you pointed out that there were aspects of their culture that should not just be led into the United States and encouraged to run wild, you were a nasty, bigot, racist, homophobe, evil, super duper terrible person. No, it is ridiculous to suggest that all cultures are equally wonderful. No, you know what? There are no United States festivals for throwing and eating poop. There are a couple of other countries around the world who happen to have festivals in some regions for throwing and eating poop. Not a joke. 2 regions in India have a throwing and eating poop festival every freaking year. No, you can't mention that. After all, that's terribly racist. Why? Why? There's no reason to just open the floodgates and let everything. No, this is why assimilation is key. Now, that said, I do want to point out one last little bit here before we get to the kind of redistricting conversation, just kind of at a broad perspective here. Hakeem Jeffries was asked, hey, you said that National Guardsmen were going to be running around shooting people, and now it's National Guardsmen that have been shot and murdered in Washington, D.C. Do you have anything to say about your earlier assertions that Washington, D.C. civilians were going to be shot and at risk? Here was him awkwardly trying to dance around this today.
At this moment.
Following the National Guard shooting that happened last week, do you still stand by your August statement that deploying the National Guard will harm DC's youth and DC's residents?
First of all, I'm not clear what statement you're making reference to.
This is from August 11th.
Well, I'm not clear what statement you're making reference to, but I stand by the view that we support local law enforcement to keep communities safe all across the country. And of course, our heart goes out to, our prayers go out to the families of the victim, and we're praying that the other National Guardsman comes through his serious injuries.
Are you going to? I'm going to level with some of the reporters out there, excellent reporters. If you are going to ask a representative, hey, you made this early statement, have another phone right there. Have a little tablet. Get yourself a little $50, $80 tablet with the video ready to play right then, right there at full volume of the previous statement. So when one of these elbow lickers starts saying, well, I don't even remember that comment, you just hit play and say, this one right here, you feckless liar, and then force him to awkwardly watch himself say something that's really gross in the present context. It's not difficult. Now, speaking of saying things in the present context, we might get to President Trump calling Tim Walz retarded a little bit later, maybe in the next show. There are now Democrats coming out and doubling and tripling down on things. There's an Indiana state senator who has now decided to, like a coward, hide behind his disabled son and say, I'm not voting for redistricting in Indiana because my son has Down syndrome, and because Trump used that slur, the R word, ooh, I'm not voting. Okay. Don't hide behind your children for policies. Someone else saying something should not be why you choose to alter the policy for those in your state. You're representing people. And that brings us to the kind of state Senate argument right now, because there are some cases in which there are state senators and Republican Party people who are receiving bomb threats and are receiving, swatting threats and things of that nature. I would like to remind all of you out there that the majority of times that we find in individuals who are swatted, individuals who there are attempted bomb threats thrown. They're either children who are calling them in, or it is a full-on political joke, often perpetuated by people of kind of outside actors trying to stir up trouble. I very, very highly doubt, based on any of the social media that I've seen whatsoever, all the way down and deep inside some of the particular groups that are advocating very passionately for things like redistricting, no one's out there going, yeah, let bomb threats and death threat. No, overblown. It is. I'm sorry. I'm not going to sit here and pretend, oh, well, don't you think it's awful? Of course I think it's awful. Don't do it. But the idea that, oh, well, this is Republicans' fault for wanting redistricting so badly, so terribly, the bomb threats are being sent out. Stop it. No, that's not how that works. No. Mamdani tried this on election day. You remember, oh, well, Trump's out there. Look at all these bombs. Clearly, it's Trump. Stop it. Don't be stupid. So we'll get into the redistricting mess a little bit more, because right now I'm also enjoying, as all of the governors say, well, I want Trump to call me retarded, which is apparently what Josh Shapiro said tonight. There are also those who are very mad that the redistricting map for the state of Indiana has been put forward, and it splits Marion County into different pieces. And the argument also being made by the liberals, that I'm going to give them 24 hours to fully hang themselves on, is that, oh, they're not letting black people be a segregated voting district anymore. They're splitting it up by like economic community and like culture community in the capital of the state. And they're very, very mad. They're very upset that we don't racially segregate voting districts. So that's going to be some more fun. I do want to get to just a touch of mail time here before we're done. Chuck Schumer threatening action against Donald Trump on Venezuela. This is at 6:07 p.m. Thanks for the update, Nick. He says, let me be clear. If Donald Trump continues his actions against Venezuela, we will immediately file a war powers resolution to block the deployment of U.S. forces to Venezuela. No U.S. forces are deployed to Venezuela right now that I am aware of, but good luck with that. The power to declare war lies solely in the hands of Congress, not Donald Trump. It's posturing. All of this posturing that they're trying so hard to hang Trump as the war criminal. No, that ain't happening. There was a mail time question that I wanted to get to that I think is a pretty good one. This is from Peggy52. Tony, can Tim Walz sue Trump for calling him retarded? No. And you can't, that doesn't count as defamation. Defamation means that you have to know that you're lying. Like there has to be you have to misrepresent an objective fact. And in the American colloquial, it is in fact considered a common enough insult to call someone retarded that's not going to turn into any kind of a defamation lawsuit. Because if it did, Tim Walz would have to take, I'm not joking, this has been a thing. There are at least 3 cases that I know of. I have a special education license that is still active from when I taught. I remember this from studying. There are at least 3 cases where someone had to prove via a cognitive test they were not retarded, mentally retarded in the academic sense, which again, now that there's considered a spectrum of disorder or neurodivergence or whatever they're calling it, the word really has no meaning anymore. But alas, Tim Walz theoretically in a lawsuit would have to take a cognitive test to prove that he is not, and I quote, retarded. Regardless of how interesting that would be, no, I don't think there's no legal standing. There's no damages. There's not people that are now like going out of their way to like speak very softly to Tim Walz. I don't think that people are requesting that he get an IEP or a 504. So there's no damages. People insult politicians all the time. That's not a thing. It's not like, for example, if someone called President Trump the N-word, that it'd be, well, defamation. I'm not black, so therefore that's defamation. No, that's not how that works. Insults and things like that, calling people nasty, naughty names of any sort, whether mildly bad or atrocious, that's not defamation territory. Saying Donald Trump is, and then listing a crime like pedophile, yeah, well, that has defamatory action, because then there's damages, and then you're accusing someone of committing a crime. It's not a crime to be retarded. So those things said, we're going to get emails. And you guys have a lovely, lovely evening. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Take care.